Hello everyone, this is Tom in Los Angeles. I hope everyone is doing very well today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ninth canto of Inferno of the Divine Comedy and make some comments. The ninth canto of Inferno is a wonderful canto, and it's even, in my opinion, even more full of mystery and fascinating enigmas than many other cantos. So the canto starts simply continuing from the previous one. The outward color cowardice painted me when I beheld my leader turning back, repressed his own new pallor more hurriedly. It's this first portion of the canto is of such a psychological sophistication that many commentators have said it's almost unprecedented in contemporary writers and authors or poets of Dante. The way the relationship between Dante and Virgil, as it's explained here in the dialogue, could very well be part of a modern fiction novel dialogue, of a contemporary literary novel, let's say, literary fiction. He paused with an attentive air, but like one listening, not watching, for the eye saw little in the air so dark and fog so thick. Virgil is the guide, it's very dark, and he's looking up, waiting for this somebody to arrive and help them out, but nothing is happening. We have to win this battle, he started to say, or else, and she who offered so much aid, late though it seems to be, and still on the way. In the Italian version, it's not clear that it's a she, the person that Virgil is referring to. But most people, really most scholars, agree that this person is Beatrice. And what Virgil is saying fundamentally is expressing his doubt. He's expressing his doubt about the successful continuing of their mission, because nothing is happening, no one is coming to help them, and he's saying we certainly need to win this battle, reminding also, Dante is reminding us that this is an epic poem, even though a very special type of epic with a very special type of hero. But then there's this hesitation in these two words, se non, which means if not, or unless. Probably unless will be the perfect translation. Unless, and it keeps the ... suspended, Virgil is actually thinking, unless maybe I have misunderstood what Beatrice told me, or maybe there's something that's gone wrong. So he has a moment of doubt. I could see plainly, Dante says, how he strove to hide his sentence's beginning with its close, in different words from those he would have said, scaring me nonetheless, each broken phrase leading me to a meaning perhaps much worse than any he held. In trying to hide his own insecurity, Virgil does even a bigger damage on Dante, who is very perceptive, and Dante can see that Virgil is trying to hide his own hesitation to avoid scaring Dante, but he scares him even more. And it's really fascinating how Dante, his main feeling, his main emotion from the very beginning of Inferno has been fear. It's part of the genius of this poem, in my opinion, because so many of our emotions and so many of our behaviors are really driven by fear, if we think about it. He is only expressing that in a very direct way. Dante the Pilgrim, the character Dante in the poem, behaves in a very almost childlike way. In fact, from a point of view of the emotions, but also behaviors, which is very spontaneous and emotional. In fact, the first thing that he asks Virgil is what probably any child would ask an adult when they're hiking up a mountain and the adult seems to not know exactly where he's going, or maybe he seems lost. The first thing that a child asks in this type of situation would be, are you sure that you know the road? Are you sure you know the way? And you're taking us, or are you taking me to the place that we're supposed to go to? That's almost literally what Dante asks Virgil in an almost discourteous way here. He goes, does anyone whose place is the first circle, where the only curse is having no hope, ever come down so far as this grim hollow? Which you can paraphrase in, do you know where you're actually going, Virgil? But Virgil doesn't really miss a bit, and he takes the question literally, and he answers, actually, in fact, I was already here in the past, and so I already know my way. This is, by the way, something that will be very different in purgatory, where Virgil does not know his way. And many times he will need to ask people and souls around because he doesn't know exactly where to climb up from circle to circle in purgatory. By the way, what Dante narrates here, this episode where apparently Virgil would have been conjured by Ericto, this witch, down to hell for a particular mission, is an invention. Is something that Dante invented as a historic past to build part of the narrative. It's something that doesn't have any particular correlation with other classical writings. So this made-up story by Dante says that the time Ericto made me enter with this wall to draw a spirit from the circle of Judas. The circle of Judas is the bottom of hell, the Judeca, which is the lowest and darkest place of all, and farthest from the heaven whose dome encloses everything in creation. But I know the way, be sure of that. At this point, Virgil is trying again to completely reassure Dante that he knows what he's doing. He's reassured, even if he's really not. So in this situation where Virgil hasn't really successfully convinced Dante, the furies appear, the three furies, to taunt Virgil and Dante from within the city. These three furies, or harpies, come from the classical mythology, and we've seen them in Virgil's works already. Why do they appear at this moment? They appear very probably, very likely, because number one, Virgil is not complying with what the devils have told him to do, to go back and to send the pilgrim back by himself, etc. They're not doing that. And number two, because these harpies say that they remember the time when Theseus went down to hell and create some troubles for them. He was then saved by Hercules. There's a lot of classical mythology to refer to this piece of narration. They are taunting Virgil and Dante, and they threaten to bring out Medusa, or the Gorgo, with her face that can petrify whoever looks at her. At this point, one of the first very strange scenes of this canto takes place, which is Dante covering his own eyes because he doesn't want to see Medusa, just like Virgil is warning him to do. And also Virgil covering Dante's eyes over Dante's hands. So Dante has not only his own hands, but also Virgil's hands covering his eyes. In this poem, so full of symbolism and allegories, it's certain that there must be some type of additional layer behind this image. And many have seen in the symbol of Virgil's hands simply the studies of philosophy, because Virgil is reason. Given that Medusa or Gorgo represents passions, the passions that lead to sin and sensuality and all that, the three harpies, of course, symbolize something evil, even if every commentator says something different. Somebody mentioned three types of wrath, and anger. Someone else said that they represent some other type of sins, but in any case, they represent evil, for sure. And to resist from the temptation of evil, Dante is using not only his own will strength, but also the study of philosophy to be steadier in his own feet. And here we finally get to the most mysterious lines of this canto that I find truly fascinating, because nobody has been able to resolve them. The number of interpretations of these next lines is unbelievable. I'm referring to these lines. O you whose mind is clear, understand well the lesson that underlies the veil of these strange verses I have written. I am actually reading from Pinsky, who translates in verses that I have written. However, Dante doesn't say verses that I have written. Dante says il velame degli versi strani, simply the veil of these strange verses. So it's not clear by what Dante says, based on what Dante says, whether he's referring to verses before these lines or after these lines. And I've read some absolutely very imaginative interpretations of these lines. I don't want to spend too much time talking about them, because obviously I have no idea, like anybody else. It's also interesting how many critics and academics, once they start liking a certain option, they will express it with words like obviously it's like that, and for sure this means, which nothing is obvious and nothing is for sure. But I can say I have maybe a certain preference, and I found that an Italian professor is referring to a doctrinal diatribe that had been going on for some years in Dante's times between Dominicans and Franciscans, in particular between the theology of St. Thomas and the theology of Matthew of Acquasparta. He was a cardinal later on and a theologian as well. And he was a Franciscan, of course. Well, St. Thomas with the Dominicans. The matter of this diatribe was something that to us today sounds like a very inconsequential matter, which is the movement of angels. St. Thomas in his theology, commenting from Aristotle, etc., was saying that the angels and the souls, in other words, the spiritual beings, didn't have any matter or form. They were made only of essence, and therefore they could move and appear from one place to the other immediately. While Matthew Acquasparta and other Franciscans were of the opinion that angels in particular could move through space and time, and actually did, because they were made of matter and form. They were not only essence and existence. If they had been only made of essence and existence, this would not account for their contingents, and that would make them almost equal to God. Only God can be only essence and existence. The same lines are found in Canto number 8 of Purgatory. Not the same exact lines, but very similar lines about Dante talking to the reader and almost sending a signal, like a traffic light or something, where Dante is saying, be careful, I'm actually saying something, but you need to read between the lines here. And in Purgatory, the lines that we find in Canto number 8, verses 19 to 21, again refer to a certain veil, and just like here, they're followed by the coming of an angel, or in particular, or in the specific, of two angels who come down from the sky. So it could be a good argument, this one about the movement of angels, because especially in this canto, we see how many lines Dante writes describing all the time that Virgil and Dante are waiting for this angel to come. He's not arriving, and then, so that means that from the moment he's been summoned to the moment that he actually arrives, there is some time, which proves that Dante is supporting the Franciscan doctrine as opposed to St. Thomas's. By the way, for almost the entire Divine Comedy, Dante sticks pretty faithfully to St. Thomas's doctrine. So it's very interesting. I also find Musa's interpretation very convincing, and Musa doesn't talk about the movement of angels, but he talks about the three advents of Christ. Musa says that symbolically, these type of passages, the angel that comes down to hell to help Dante and Virgil, and then the angels in purgatory who arrive to talk to Dante and Virgil to help them out, and finally the coming of Beatrice that symbolizes the coming of Christ in Judgment Day, are analogous to the medieval belief in the three advents of Christ. Saint Bernard, who appears in the Paradise to lead Dante, expressed this concept in his sermons on the Advents. There is the first advent of Christ, which culminates in his descent into hell. The second advent is the daily coming of Christ into men's hearts every day of our life. And the third advent will be the last judgment. In this way, covering the entire history of Christianity, from the first coming of Christ to Judgment Day. So I think Musa spells out a very convincing and elegant option of interpretation as well. Many scholars take a little bit of a simpler and easier way, and they say, you know, there could be an allegoric significance behind this, and it could be simply that Virgil is reason, and like we were saying for Canto 8, by himself, reason by itself cannot help the everyman, Dante, defeat sin, therefore, or defeat evil. Therefore, the pilgrim cannot hope to complete his journey without the help of divine grace. That's also possible. There is something to say about the fact that a lot of people went beyond and started to concoct theories about Dante being part of the Templars or some secret sect, and referring in these lines to a secret code or a cryptographic type of message. I'm not saying that is impossible. Everything is possible, and the Divine Comedy is structured in such a precise mathematical way that numbers have a great importance in the poem. But it would certainly almost defy the purpose or conflict with Dante's explicit purpose of writing something that is for everybody, in Vulgar, not in Latin, in Vulgar Italian in a certain sense, that is understandable to everybody. So why doing something like that on one hand, and on the other hide a secret code in the poem that nobody in 700 years has been able to decipher? Then we have this grandiose scene where the angel actually finally arrives. And this would be so fantastic to watch in a movie, maybe sitting in a movie theater, because it's visually a stunning sequence. This angel, this creature full of light, probably with immense wings, arriving there in his grandiosity. We don't know what kind of angel, or if it's an archangel or anything. Dante doesn't say. He takes a couple of naturalistic similes from Ovid. Especially one that I really love is the damsels, the wrathful in the Styx. There are so many, and they're swimming one above each other. As soon as the angel starts literally walking on these waters, And as if it was nothing and just wiping off the dirt from his face, they scuttle about, they really start to run around like frogs. As frogs are quick to vanish through water and hunch on bottom sand as soon as they see their enemy, the snake, so I saw more than 1,000 souls of the ruin flee before one who strode across the Styx. You can see them moving in a... The frogs are a perfect simile because they're in a certain sense a little bit slimy and disgusting, and they move very, very quickly as soon as the angel is proceeding. Incredible scene. So finally, thanks to the angel's help, our two heroes are able to get into the city of Dis. As soon as I was in, I saw a great plain filled with woe and torment. And as on the land at Arles, where the river runs, he sees a great plain, this great field, desolate, full of tombs. And he thinks about two particular places that probably Dante had visited in his life, and this is why he mentions them, where he had seen many tombs, and especially ancient tombs, because these are ancient tombs of different shapes and they are open. And more bitter, for among the graves were flames that made the sepulchres glow with fiercer heat than a smith could need. And among these catacombs the lids were raised, with sounds of woe so great, those within surely suffered horrible pain. So Dante asks who is there, who was these condemned souls, and Virgil replies that these are the arch heretics, and they groan along with all the converts they had made, the followers of every sect, and there is a lot of people in these graves, and there is a different level of heat and pain depending on which type of heresy they were guilty of. Finally, Dante and Virgil turn to the right, and this opens up the next canto, canto number 10. This is yet another mystery of the canto. Why do they turn to the right? For almost all of Inferno, they will keep turning towards the left. For Purgatory, in Purgatory, they will keep turning towards the right. The right is the good direction in a certain sense for Dante's imagery, because you do the sign of cross with the right side, etc., etc. And left is in a certain sense bad. So why in this particular moment he specifies that they turn right? No idea. One closing comment. I've been discussing about and thinking about the Divine Comedy for a long time now, and I really realize how it's easy for us to apply our own schemes and models to Dante's situations and to Dante's way of thinking. In particular, we are very apt to think that one thing is reality and one thing is fiction. And in fact, in books we have fiction, non-fiction, and they're very separated one from each other. And we understand the separation very well. It's probable or possible, and I say that without obviously being an expert or anything about medieval thought or anything, but it's possible that in Dante's mind, reality and fiction were not as separated as we expect them to be, or as they are in our minds. Especially with Dante being a poet, not only being a medieval man, but also being a poet and somebody who lived his life with a little bit with his head in the clouds. Fiction and reality, facts and imagination certainly tended to blur. I'm saying this is my opinion, tended to blur in his mind in many occasions. And when I read the Divine Comedy under this particular view or key, some things make more sense. In addition, and this is something related to Dante's way of thinking and his worldview, I realize the more I read and reread the Divine Comedy and reread the Divine Comedy, that every single detail of Dante's life and experiences, all his experiences, doesn't matter whether they were good or bad, were full of meaning. Dante's world was full of meaning for himself. And I have no problem imagining that it was like this for most people in his times. Everything was full of symbolism, numbers, and meaning. Meaning is almost the most important thing in our life, is what drives us as human beings. And this opens up a reflection about the fate of meaning in our age, in the technological age, in an age of ethical relativism, where everyone has to make up their own meaning by themselves, like the US Supreme Court said a couple of times, or at least one time. And in a world where maybe there isn't as much meaning as in Dante's world. For what reason, I don't know, but that could be a good direction for an inquiry or a nice discussion. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I look forward to discussing with you about Canto 9 in our comments, and look forward to also discussing Canto 10.